Hi, I'm Kevin Foster, and welcome to the next episode of Strange Wilderness. Now, I'm in the heart of Maine, deep in the woods, and this is where I talked about before. I actually had my first encounter up at Hockomock State Park. It wasn't very exciting. I just saw something sitting in the middle of a path, stand up, and walk away into the woods. But what I'm going to talk about now is some of my more terrifying and close encounters with some very what I call scary monsters. So stay tuned. Now, my second encounter actually happened the same week as the first encounter I had up in Maine. I was coming down a ski mobile trail much like this one up in Vermont. I was staying at my brother's house. I volunteered to help paint the house for him, and I got up to what they call White River Junction up in Fairleigh, Vermont, and after spending the morning doing some painting on the house, I decided to take my other dog out for a walk, and we started walking down a trail much like this. On one side over here was huge cornfields, and the thing was just littered with spruce trees, and this is what happened. So my dog and I continued to head up this ski mobile trail that was at the base of my brother's house. It was a kind of steep incline, and we just headed up past all the spruce trees, and we came up to the top of this ridge area, and it was actually kind of beautiful. There were some brooks around, but on one particular side where these giant spruce were, my dog suddenly froze, and he started barking at the spruce trees, and all of a sudden there's this deep guttural growl coming from the spruce tree, and I saw this big, huge, hairy arm come out and wrap around part of the spruce tree and just start shaking it violently. And when it was doing it, these really deep, deep growls started coming, and it was really shaking the tree violently. Well, my dog panicked, and he just shot past me and headed into the cornfield that was on our right. And I paused for a moment. I turned around and looked at the spruce tree, and again it was shaking violently, and I heard my dog yelping, and I just took off in a hurry chasing after the dog. I was crashing through the cornfields. I kept turning around and looking over my shoulder to see if whatever this was coming after us, but I didn't see anything. But as we were running through the cornfield, off to the left, way down towards the edge of the cornfield, I heard more crashing coming through there. So I continued following where my dog was crashing through, and we eventually came out on this dirt road which led up to the entrance of my brother's driveway. And we started back up the driveway, and again on the right was the beginning of the ski mobile trail, and I just kept looking down there, really panicked. I was actually really frightened for my life. And we kind of bolted up my brother's driveway and headed into the house, and I just kept wondering, what was that? I kept thinking it was a bear, it was a moose, and then I kept thinking about the big huge hairy arm that came out, and I'm like, no, that was something else. That was like what I had just seen up at Hockomock State Park, and I was just totally panicked for the whole day. So I actually really didn't sleep too well that night. I was actually kind of nervous and worried about what I had seen during the day. But I did manage to fall asleep, and at one point I woke up to my dog barking. I was up on the third floor. My brother had this 3-story house. And I went down to the second story, and my dog was barking outside this huge picture window. So I went out over to him and looked out. It was pitch black. There was a moon up above the field that we were overlooking, and all of a sudden I noticed that there were like 2 headlights coming out of the woods, and I said to myself, what is that, an ATV coming through the woods at this time of night? It was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, but there was no sound. It was just these two like headlights coming through the woods. But once these headlights got to the field, they separated, and there were two lights that were scanning back and forth across the field like it was they were looking for something. And I watched and watched for probably about 5 minutes, them just going back and forth across the field. And then all of a sudden they went to the edge of the woods and came together, and they both took off in a different direction into the woods. And at this point I noticed there was this what looked like a small bush in the middle of the field. This bush all of a sudden came to life, and it stood up, and I saw this dark silhouette, and it just walked off through the field and disappeared into the woods. Needless to say, again, I was very panicked. I couldn't sleep at all for the rest of the night, and actually ended up packing up the next morning and leaving and heading home to Cape Cod. And my brother called up and a week later asked me, well, what happened to the rest of the rooms? Why didn't you paint them? And I actually said to him, I'm sorry, I was sick. I had to go home. And for 20 years I've sat on this story, and I wouldn't tell anyone what had happened until 3 years ago, when I had this other very similar and scary, terrifying encounter up in Maine. And so I was on what they call Great Wasp Island, which is right off of Jonesboro, Maine. I was visiting my oldest son and his granddaughter, and he was at work that day, and my granddaughter and I were hanging out, and we decided to head up about a quarter of a mile down the dirt road to a pond. And we got to the pond, and we started walking around, and all of a sudden we noticed out in the middle of the pond was this seagull that was flapping around, and it could, for some reason, couldn't fly away. And as I was watching it, I noticed as its head tilted back that it looked like its throat had been slit, and it was really bleeding. And at first I thought maybe a large snapping turtle was holding it down, but when I saw the slit throat, I said, well, geez, something has gotten it. So I said to my granddaughter, hey, let's walk around to the other side of the pond, and we started walking the edge of the pond, and we came up to this, around this corner, and we came up to another group of very large spruce trees, and all of a sudden, again, this deep guttural growl started coming from the area of the spruce trees. And I leaned over and quietly said to my granddaughter, do you hear that? And she says, yeah. And I said, why don't you turn around? And at the time we were with my dog Chewy. I said, why don't you turn around and just start slowly walking back towards the dirt road, which wasn't far, and head back to the camper, and I'll be there shortly. So I turned back to the spruce tree, and all of a sudden the growling got louder. It was this real deep roar that was coming from it. And again, the tree started really shaking violently. I couldn't see an arm shaking it because the spruce tree was too full. But at the same time I heard this, behind it I heard this other crashing in the woods, which was actually up where the trail was going in the other direction. And I started getting very fearful for my granddaughter because she was coming out the other end of the trail to get onto the dirt road. So I immediately turned about face and started running along the edge of the pond and started running to catch up to my granddaughter. And again, I was petrified and very nervous for us, and I kept looking over the back of my shoulder to see if the thing had come out of the bushes and was coming after us. And as I was running and caught up to her, I could still hear the deep growls and hear the tree shaking. And we were pretty much a good distance away. And I just turned to my granddaughter and I said to her, just run. I said, run back to the trailer. And we ran all the way back. And, thinking about it now, again, memories just came flooding back to me of what had happened 20 years ago up in Vermont. It was like the exact same thing. and I knew immediately what it was. I didn't even think it was a bear. I didn't think it was a moose. I knew this time it was definitely a Bigfoot. It was definitely a Sasquatch. So, as you can see behind me, I found this very odd, strange structure that looks like it's been put together by something. I don't think it's man-made, but if you take a look, this is something that Sasquatches usually do, whether they're making a home or making markers. I'm not really sure, but take a look. This is really interesting, and I just found this. I'm in Acadia National State Park, and again, it's a very odd structure. Loki. Now, in closing, I just wanted to say that I have still been having different weird and strange encounters. A month ago, I was coming down this driveway here, coming onto this dirt road, and I heard a huge wood knock behind me down the road. I actually packed up that day and headed down to Camden State Park and went camping there for a couple days, and was awoken one night, probably about 12:30, to these loud, strange growls and howls coming from the ridgetop of a mountain that was behind us. So again, these things are still happening. There's still strange things going on out there, and I'll be here to talk about a lot more in the next episode, so stay tuned.